Grief, a powerful, painful emotion that most of us will experience. The waves of sadness, anger, shock, and numbness can feel overwhelming, sometimes even breaking us down physically. Yet, despite its reach, grief is often met with silence. We shy away from talking about it openly, as if sharing our pain is too much to bear or too much to ask of others. But grief deserves a voice.
People don't like to talk about it, and I think it's really important that we get comfortable talking about death and loss and grief because it's part of living.
Yes.
Without death, you don't have life, and without life, you don't have death.
Today's guest on Grieving Out Loud understands the depths of grief all too well. Nicola Marshall's world was shattered by sudden, heartbreaking loss that made headlines around the world. Yet, even in the face of unimaginable pain, she found a path forward, one careful step at a time. Now she's dedicating her life to understanding grief and supporting others through their own journeys, offering hope when it feels the hardest to find.
I think it's really important that we remember our loved ones and we feel comfortable talking about them.
Well, Nicola, it is so fantastic to see you again. We met in David Kessler's Grief Educator training. We both went through that program. I did it because I lead support groups for Emily's Hope, and you did it because you also help people.
Yeah, it's so lovely to see you, Angela. Thank you so much for inviting me on. Yes, because I have a meet and grief cafe, which I have once a month, and I'm also a hypnotherapist and grief coach.
Yeah. What is a meet and greet?
A meet and grief cafe. So that's what I called it. And basically, it's just a safe space where people come and talk about their grief and how, it takes you to places you possibly don't want to be, places you don't expect to be, where you can talk openly and honestly without people going, oh, here she goes again, because sometimes when we're in grief, you kind of get that feeling that sometimes people don't really want to hear about it again, or am I talking too much about my loved one? So it's just a safe space where people come who are grieving their loved ones and can talk about it openly and honestly.
I think that everyone who has experienced the devastating grief of child loss knows exactly what you're saying when we talk about how people don't really want to hear about it anymore. And I think there are a couple things going on. First, I think that people don't want to think something like this can happen to them. So they really don't want to think about it too much. And also people in our cultures, UK and United States both, I know you live across the pond, but we have a similar culture in that we don't really want to be exposed to grief all the time, and we want people to get over it.
Exactly. And as we know, there's no getting over it. You really do have to just work through it at your pace and take it a day at a time. And, people don't like to talk about it. And I think it's really important that we get comfortable talking about death and loss and grief because it's part of living.
Yes.
Without death, you don't have life. And without life, you don't have death.
100% true. But the horrible thing that led us both to this point where we're talking about grief, I guess we become grief experts because we've both lived it through the loss of a child. And I am so sorry for the loss of your son, Lucas, just this whole entire story, because I know it breaks my heart. And I'd like for you to share it with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you so much. And again, I'm sorry about your loss of Emily. So as we know, we're members of this club. We don't want to be. And Lucas and I and his friend were on holiday. I'm a single parent, so there's just the three of us. And we were in holiday in Spain. And it was 2019. And it was the last day of our holiday. The night before, we'd been out to a restaurant. And on our way back, Lucas said to me, Mum, this has been the best holiday of my life. And I said, Lucas, really? You've just been to Thailand with your dad and you had an amazing time. He said, I did, but this has been brilliant because I've done exactly what it is I want to do. I've been rollerblading every night to the skate park. So, and he spent days on the beach and we just had an amazing holiday.
The next day, the three of them spent a beautiful morning at the beach, soaking up the sun, making memories. Then they headed back to the hotel to pack up and get ready for their trip home.
Our bags were packed, passports on our suitcases, and I was just making some sandwiches. Lucas was talking to me in the kitchen, and then next thing he walked into the lounge. I carried on making the sandwiches. I walked in, and his friend said, "Lucas has gone over the balcony." And I said, "What?" And he said, "Lucas has gone over the balcony." And I ran from the kitchen through the apartment, and we were on the 7th floor. And I looked over, and Lucas had fallen, or I don't know what, because I was in the kitchen, off over the balcony. And he was a big lad, Lucas, for 12. He was very sporty. He loved singing, acting, all of that. And literally my whole world collapsed in that moment. I remember looking over the balcony, and there was lots of people around him because it was by the side of the pool. And I ran down the 7 flights of stairs because I remember thinking, I don't want to get stuck in the lift. And there was Lucas. And by this time, and it was literally a couple of minutes, there was so many police came from the beach side because we were in Spain on holiday. So many people came from the beach. There was paramedics there very quickly. And I was by the side of Lucas. I'd stepped back, obviously. And I didn't know what was happening. All I could see was my son couldn't breathe. And he was desperately trying to breathe. And then, I don't know how long it was, but not very long, my son died in front of me. And for the first time in his life, I couldn't help him.
Right. You were powerless to do anything.
I was absolutely powerless. And Lucas is my only child. And he was my life. And in that moment, my whole life just collapsed.
Yeah.
I can actually remember my brain literally going,
Like shutting off.
just shutting off. Yeah.
Right. The shock.
Completely shutting down. Yeah.
Right.
I understand now it does that to protect me. I understand that. And then I remember hearing that guttural sound that comes from us. And I don't know where that comes from, your deep soul. And I remember just screaming. And the last time I heard that sound is when I told my mom that my brother had died, because my brother took his own life at 29. And so I never thought I'd hear that sound again. And then next thing I heard it from me.
Yeah.
And then I lay with Lucas for about an hour and a half until they came and took him away in a body bag.
Horrific. And I can relate to
Horrific.
what you're saying, that my daughter, when I got to the apartment where she was, the paramedics were working on her. I believe she was already dead. That sound that you're talking about, I know I made that sound. I laid with my daughter until they came to take her away in a body bag as well. In my case, the police had to come to investigate the scene, as I'm sure they did with you as well, but it was a different circumstance.
Yeah.
And then when you have something so traumatic like that happen, you relive that. I don't relive it every day now. It has been 6 years,
No.
but I still, now when we're talking about it, you start to relive it, of course. But I just relived it in my mind over and over again, as I'm sure you did as well.
Yeah, you absolutely do, don't you? I can remember actually the police said to me, "Nicola," and we're in Spain, he said, "You need to come back to the apartment." I said, "I don't want to leave my son." And at this point, Lucas was still alive, and he was desperately fighting to breathe. So I remember again going back up to the apartment. He said, "You have to come," because obviously he wanted to see what was going on. We got upstairs, I got him in the apartment, and I remember he walked in and he said, "Oh my goodness, Nicola, no," because he could see the suitcases were packed, passports were on top, there were sandwiches half made in the kitchen, the apartment was pristine. 2 hours we would have been in a cab going to the airport. And then I remember again just running down the stairs, and I got there, and Lucas was still trying to breathe, and the paramedics were all around him, and then he died.
Nicola says that horrifying scene replayed in her mind every day for at least a year.
I could see myself from above. I could see myself from every part of me. And obviously that's trauma. Watching myself
Right.
run down the stairs, run to Lucas, everything,
Yeah,
like it was in slow motion.
exactly.
Yeah, and that first year, I don't know about you, but I don't remember
No,
much.
I have a lot of memory lapses from that first year, and especially right around the time that her death happened. Also complicating both my daughter's and Nicola's son's deaths is the fact that they made headlines. In Nicola's situation, the news reached a global audience with coverage in outlets like the Daily Mail and The Guardian.
It was in every national newspaper. It was on the news, on the TV. I stayed in Spain for 9 days because I wouldn't come home without Lucas. And I know there was reporters looking for me. Luckily, I had a friend living in Spain and he came and got me. And, we all went back to his villa. 2 of my friends flew out from the UK because my family wanted to fly. Everybody wanted to fly out. And I was so, well, out of it. I don't remember, I was
Sure.
like, I didn't know what was happening. I'm trying to come to terms with what's just happened. I had to go to the police station, get interviewed.
Oh, I suppose, yeah, because they wanted to know what happened. And were you ever able to piece together in any way why he went over the balcony?
I absolutely don't know. I mean, Lucas was always doing, sort of balancing, and he thought Lucas,
Being a 12-year-old boy? You mean he was being a 12-year-old boy?
he was being a 12-year-old
Yeah.
boy, and he gonna rule the world. So I was literally in the kitchen and he left the kitchen and then that was it. I never thought in that second that that would be the last time that I would be spending time with my son.
And death does teach us that life can change in a second and how
Yeah.
fragile and precious it truly is.
Yeah, and I really do believe life is so fragile and precious. And within one moment, your whole life can change. So that's what I always tell people, please live life to the fullest because you never know when it's going to change. And I'm not that person that I was,
No.
it's 5 years now. This month, it's 5 years. And I'm not that person that I was, as you know yourself, 5 years
Right. And
ago.
I guess I changed a little bit reluctantly. I didn't want this to be my story, as I'm sure you felt the same way. This is not supposed to be my story. This is not supposed to be what happens in our lives. And
No.
it's fighting that, then you have to accept. I think the acceptance is the part that takes so much time.
Yeah.
And then to almost, as I know, because you're talking to me today, and we're going to talk about some other things that
Hmm.
you've done, to embrace it actually. Because in order for me to do the advocacy work
Yeah.
that I do to try to end the fentanyl epidemic in our nation, I have to embrace it, right? And in order for you to be doing the
Yeah.
work and talking about grief and death, you have to embrace it. And it takes some time to get
Mhm.
to that point.
Absolutely. And as I said, that first year, I do not know how I survived. Well, 3 days after Lucas died, I tried to take my own life because I thought, well, what's the point? Everything I'd done was for my son. Thank goodness, of course, I'm still here because it wasn't my time.
But Nicola, I don't think there's a parent who has lost a child who can't relate to that sentiment or that thought. Now, I didn't
Yeah.
take any action, but certainly
Yeah.
it went through my mind. I don't want to live anymore. I lost a child.
Mm,
And you lost your only child, and you're a single parent. You don't have that
mm,
support of a spouse.
mhm.
And like you said, I can understand that's your whole world. I've talked to other parents who lost their only child. I had a woman on the podcast recently who went through in vitro, was pregnant with triplets, lost 2 of them, gave birth to 1 daughter, and then lost her only daughter. So it's just,
Yeah.
it's so unfair. And you just think, how can this happen? And
Mm,
how do I go on?
exactly. And I really didn't know how I would go on. But you know what? I think it's about, again, it's finding your friends. And I don't know if you found this, but friends step up who you least expect. And the friends you think would step up, they step away or they fall away because they don't really know how to deal
Yeah.
with it. And family as well won't talk about it or are scared to talk about it, some of them. So, yeah, that was a really tough year. And of course, I didn't have a partner, who could support me. So I did rely heavily on my friends. But people get on with their lives, and you're left in your messy, tatty life to try and pick up the pieces and get on with
Right.
it. How do you do that?
Life goes on, life marches forward.
Yeah,
But for you,
yeah,
for me, there is a certain part of our lives that will never move forward, right? Because not that you're stuck in
yeah.
grief. I don't want to say that I'm stuck, but it's something that we always
No.
will have with us. Through her grief work, Nicola learned just how important it is to let emotions come and go as they need to without holding back. She wants people to know it's okay if they suddenly feel overwhelmed, even if it happens in the middle of a crowd.
I'm sure you've done it in the supermarket. I've started crying.
Yes.
Or I've just walked out and sat in my car, got myself
Yeah.
together, and things like that.
I actually wrote a blog called Crying at Costco. So, because that's where
Yes.
I started crying because I saw a young woman who resembled my daughter walk with her parents. And I just thought that I'll never have that. And it's hard.
Yeah.
A couple of months after losing Lucas, Nicola reached out to a grief counselor. She was searching for any guidance to help her through the overwhelming pain.
It was too early really when I look back now, but it was horrendous. I didn't feel that the counselor was very good and very supportive for me. And basically she was like, well, there's the stages of grief now. Go and get on with it.
That's so unfortunate. Sadly, though, I mean, because I had a good grief counselor, but when I was searching for a counselor for my daughter when she was a teenager, we were struggling with some of her behaviors. It can be difficult to find a good counselor sometimes. You can't just go to a
Yeah,
counselor and assume that this is going to be the right person for you. You really have to, I would say, shop
correct.
around, try it out. And to someone who's grieving, maybe you don't have the bandwidth even to think, oh gosh, this person isn't working. I have to go find someone else.
Yeah, exactly. So I had that bad experience and I thought, you know what? Once I'm strong enough, I'm going to retrain and I'm going to become a counselor and I'm going to help as many people as I can. So I'm currently in my third year of psychotherapeutic counseling. I'm studying. I'm a hypnotherapist. I do EMDR, so it's rapid eye movements, and NLP. And I've retrained all of that. I'm 56, so it's taken, a little bit longer. And I've retrained since Lucas died because I just want to help people. And that helping people has really helped me.
Well, we're kindred souls in that way. And I think there are many more other parents out there like us. We have to find some kind of purpose or meaning in
Yeah.
this. And you found it. You had a
Yeah.
grief counselor that wasn't so great. So you thought, I'm going to help people. I've
Yeah.
experienced this devastation. I'm going to do it myself.
Yeah. So, and I absolutely love it. I love it. And I've also set up a meet and grief cafe again, because I thought, where am I going to go with this? I just create a safe space and I just put it out on my socials.
During these meet and grief cafes, Nicola rents a space where people can gather over food and openly share their experiences with grief.
People come from the Midlands, which is about 2 hours away. There's local people. It's really lovely. And it's just coffee, cake, or pizza, whatever, we decide that night. And it's a couple of hours where we all just talk, vent, tell, kind of the things that people say to you when you're grieving. And you think, really? Did you just say that? And it's a safe space where people can go through all the emotions that grief brings.
As Nicola continued sharing her story and connecting with others, a new opportunity emerged, one with the potential to bring her message to hundreds of thousands.
A friend of mine introduced me to a friend of hers who had done a TED talk, and I dropped her an email. It was my birthday, my last birthday, so it's in January, and I was getting ready, and I'm the designated driver because I don't drink. And the girl contacted me, Cordelia, and she said, you've got to do a TED talk. I've read your email. I've looked at your Insta. You've got to do a TED talk. And I was like, how can I do that? There's the form. She said it closes by midnight tonight. She said they're not taking anyone else on. So you've got to fill it in. I said, I've got to be out in half an hour. Fill it in. So I filled it in, quick video, filled in the form and sent it off and thought, I'll never hear from them again. And then I heard from them. And then I had to do it. I had to do it. And it was one of the most amazing experiences. It was hard work. It's not easy because I'm talking about myself, my life, my son. And I had to keep associating and disassociating. And that was really hard. So it was really difficult. And you have to write a script because Ted liked a script. So that was I think that was about my 10th rewrite. So they're all my words, all my feelings, all my emotions. And then you have to stand up and deliver it with no auto cue or anything like that. And your mind's racing. And of course, and I'm dealing with all the emotions of the death of my son and reliving that.
That alone would be difficult enough. But for Nicola, the location made it especially emotional.
And that stage that I got up on, the last time I was in that theatre, I was watching Lucas perform.
Oh, he was a singer. That's right.
Yeah.
And he was about to try out for The Voice. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was about to, the day we arrived back, he had an audition for The Voice Kids. And then he would have been going off to Holland with the school because he was in the a cappella and the chamber choir and he had a band.
All of those lost
Yeah.
dreams, all of that lost potential, it's lost upon loss. Here's Nicola on the TED Talk stage.
Having grief witnessed, it validates feelings and eases the pain of those of us grieving. I needed a tribe. Lucas was such a kind, beautiful soul. You know, he would always make people laugh if he saw that they were down. And I was sending the most amazing man into the world. And I think that is, you know, I think, gosh, you know, he would have done brilliant things and helped so many people. And I only hope now, or I believe that he's helping even more from the other side.
So how did you get from that point of being overcome by grief to being able to go to that particular stage, which would be painful, and talk about it in the way that you did?
Well, it took a long time. It took 5 years almost to get there. And that first year, I knew that I just had to heal and let myself heal. But what was really hard, Angela, was looking back at how broken and how low and fractured I was, you know. And we do say we're not broken, we're grieving, but I didn't know how I was going to pull myself up out of that. And that was really hard where I am now to keep going back in and looking at that. That was very difficult. It was very emotional.
You did express it beautifully. Like I said, that brokenness and that devastation. I thought the language that you used and the way you said it was wonderful. But also your point about certain people falling away, people you never expected coming to support you. But the fact that you do need a tribe and the way that other cultures approach death that you addressed in this talk, I thought was so interesting and relevant because there is something about our Western culture that we don't want to face it. We don't want to talk about it. We want to pretend like we're going to be young and alive forever. And other cultures are not like that. And you did some studying of that.
Yeah, well, I actually met the Mauian healers. They were in the UK from New Zealand, and I had a treatment from them, and that was amazing.
What kind of treatment? What was it?
It was a really deep energy healing. And I do energy work. You know, I'm attuned to Reiki, but it's deeper now. And when she was healing me, I felt that they dealt with a lot of unresolved childhood trauma and also ancestral trauma. And again, that sound as she was working on me came out of my mouth again. And I did this mad scream.
That's so interesting, though, that you talk about another culture and their healing practice, because I had an experience with the Native American culture in my state. We have 9 reservations in the state I live in. And I went to one of them to talk because they deal with fentanyl and the drug crisis like much of America, even worse. And they did a wiping of the tears ceremony with me and my husband afterwards. And I felt a sense of
How
healing.
lucky.
Even though I'm not part of the culture, it was their intention and how kind and beautiful it was. It was amazing. And I would never have gotten
Mm.
anything like that from anybody
Yeah.
else.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that we do look to other cultures because, this life that we have, it is a gift. It really is a gift. And we don't know when it's going to end. And so I do think it is about celebrating our lives. And, the reason that I do what I do is because it's what Lucas would expect. He would expect me, come on, mom, go and help and all like this. It's what he would expect. So, he taught me so much in his short amount of time that he was here.
So you talk about energy healing, you talk about EMDR. We've covered
Mm.
some of that in this podcast, that rapid eye movement therapy, and you also do hypnotherapy.
Yeah.
I have not covered that with anybody.
I had hypnotherapy and that's how I got into it. I had hypnotherapy and it works so well for me. And it's just basically a changed state of awareness where we bring the subconscious mind forward. You don't need to talk about past experiences. Your brain is amazingly clever and it can do the work for you. And it's just about basically getting you into a state of relaxation so that you can improve your focus and concentration, and then that's when we do the work, and it's quite rapid actually.
What did you notice when you did hypnotherapy yourself?
Well, I noticed that it really helped me with my grief, and I was able to start to then move forward with it. And I just felt strength. I felt strength because I always say as well, when you're grieving, it's kind of like there's an umbrella and there's things like, you lose your confidence, you have stress,
Right.
anxiety, you can't sleep, panic attacks and things like that. And hypnotherapy helps with those things.
Oh, yeah. I experienced those panic attacks in the weeks after Emily
Mm.
died, which I never had before. Have you lost a loved one to overdose or fentanyl poisoning? I'd like to invite you to share their story on our new Emily's Hope Memorial website called More Than Just a Number. They were our children, siblings, cousins, husbands, wives, aunts, uncles, and friends. So much more than just a number. You can submit a memorial today on morethanjustanumber.org. Despite her grief work, Nicola admits that 5 years after her son's death, some days can still be very difficult.
It's a rugged path that we tread, and we kind of get used to maneuvering our way around the obstacle. The pain for me, it has softened, but it's still there. It's still there. And as I say, I can maneuver around it as I let it flow through me.
To prepare for hard days, Nicola makes self-care a priority, especially around times like holidays and her son's birthday, when the weight of grief tends to feel heavier.
The body keeps score, doesn't it? As Bessel van der Kolk says. And my body started to ache or something just before the 20th of August. And then it was difficult as well because all his friends are learning to drive or driving now. They've just done all their mock A levels. They're all going to the festivals after their mock A levels, rugby tours. And Lucas would have been doing all of that. And I see all of his friends doing this, which is so beautiful, but it's also so tough because I think Lucas should be doing that
Right.
as well. But I just have to keep focused. And also, as I said, self-care for me is primary. I really do look after myself.
And I think the anticipation of these anniversary dates is often much worse than the actual date
Mm.
itself because, we're just thinking about
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this is coming up. And what am I supposed to do? We
Mm.
don't often know what to do. And we don't have to do
Mm.
anything, but sometimes we feel like we should know what to do or how to market or how we should be feeling, or we have these crazy expectations sometimes. And I understand completely what you
Mm.
mean when you say you see his friends moving on to things he should have been doing. And it's the same. My daughter's friends that get married, they have children, careers, and that will never happen for her. And it's that you're reminded of what you've lost when you see those things.
Yeah. Yeah, really. I mean, I'm lucky because Lucas's friends keep in touch with me and I see them. I just saw one this evening. But it's really difficult because I just think, what a life he would have had. He would have been amazing. And that's heartbreaking, I think, for all of us parents.
So you'll have this new certification and you'll continue to lead your grief
Mhm.
groups. What else do you want to do with all of this work that you've been doing?
Well, I see clients. Obviously, I'm building my practice up and I love it. I'm writing a book as well.
Oh, wonderful.
So I'm excited about that. And also, I'd like to do more speaking gigs because I absolutely love speaking on stage. And I feel it's really important, that we get our message out there and that we don't need to be alone with our grief. And it's normal. The feelings we have, the emotions we have, the anger, the sadness, the frustration, it's normal.
Right. If we could just normalize grief rather than shun people who are
Yeah,
feeling grief or make people feel like there's something wrong with them, I think that would be a
yeah,
huge
absolutely.
move forward.
Yeah, definitely. I remember at Lucas's funeral, I stood up at the end and spoke. And again, Angela, I do not know how I did that, but I did. And I said to everyone there, and there was just under 1,000 people, in the church. And I said, please, if you see me in town, don't cross the street. Come over to me, give me a hug because I may really need it, and tell me a funny story about Lucas. Tell me something that I would never know about him unless you told me that story. And so people actually do
Oh,
that. And I had a bench sculptured for Lucas as well. And you can see that on my Instagram, and it's in the center of town in his favorite park. And I often go and sit there, and so many people come and talk to me. And sometimes when I'm going, I'll see his friends just sat there as well. And it's so lovely, so
yeah. Because you
lovely.
want him to be remembered. You don't want your loved one to be forgotten.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we remember our loved ones and we feel comfortable talking about them. If somebody comes up to me, they say, how are you? I say, you know what? Today is a good day. Today is a really good day. And I will tell them exactly how I feel. And if I'm feeling bad, I'll tell them. And I'll also talk about Lucas because as soon as I start talking about Lucas, then other people will talk about Lucas as well. They're kind of like, oh, it's okay to talk about him. And I really encourage
Yeah.
that.
Well, we have a lot of listeners, a lot of people who probably are newly grieving listening to this podcast. What advice do you have for people?
Well, my advice is it's okay not to be okay and to be really kind to yourself because what we're dealing with is, something that we never expected would happen to us. So be kind to yourself.
That's wonderful advice because so often I would say be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself because we are the
Yeah.
harshest on ourselves just routinely anyway. I think in, day out life, many of us are. And then when you feel these expectations that you're supposed to move on, get on with life, and you're not able to do
Yeah.
that, there's really nothing wrong with you. Grief doesn't have a
Yeah.
timeline.
It really doesn't. And you have to just allow it to take you where it needs you to be at that time and at that moment, and that's so, so important.
In your TED Talk, you were talking about life and death, and you ended with this line, and I'm going to read it back to you because I thought it was really beautiful. Life doesn't just begin and end, it changes and transforms us. And I thought that's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. And it really does, doesn't it? Because we are not the person that we were 5, 6 years ago. We're not that person, you know. And it does change you because it's shocking and it's something you don't expect your child to die. You expect we're the parent. And I think, well, it's difficult, to bury your
Yes,
child.
it's one of the worst things I think that can happen to a parent. So
Yeah.
I do think that we can choose also if that change in us is going to be positive or negative, right? So
Yeah.
that's where we have a choice.
Yeah.
And some people don't feel like they have a choice because they're so overwhelmed by feelings of bitterness and devastation, and
Yeah.
they can't seem to pull themselves out of those feelings. But
Yeah.
we do ultimately have a choice of what path to take.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, and you've probably sat in the why me bucket as well. And I was like, why me? Why me? And then I said, you know what? Why
Why
not
not me?
me? What's so special about me?
Yes.
What is so special about me?
You're saying all of my words because I have said, why not me? And I've said, I'm not special
Yeah,
and neither are you. None of us are
no,
really
yeah,
special. Maybe we raise our kids to
yeah,
think they're so special that none of us are immune from loss and grief and death.
Yeah. For me personally, I feel I've had many lifetimes with Lucas, and I just didn't know that this lifetime was going to be so short. But I learned so much from him. He taught me so much about him, other people, about me, and I continue to learn about other people, me, and I feel for me personally, I do feel Lucas is guiding me. And again, it's what he would expect. And the times, that I've fallen down, he's gone, come on, Mum, you're my mum, get up. You can do this. So I'm like, you know what, son? I can. So I do.
Well, thank you for doing it. I know you're helping a lot of people, and that's so important. And I always say I would go through all of the devastation as bad as it is and can continue to be.
Yeah.
I would go through all of it again to have the 21 years I had with my daughter. It's not lost on
Yeah.
me that I had additional years with my child that you didn't get with yours. And I'm sorry for that.
Yeah.
But I'm sure that you feel
Mhm.
the same way, that you would always want to have him.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Always. And you know what? I always say that we have to remember our children chose us. We didn't choose them. They chose us and they choose us to teach us. And I think it's really important to listen and to understand and to give your child that time and that space to let them tell you what it is they want to tell you and want to teach you.
Right. If we can be open to our children teaching us. Not every parent can be, right? Because we're supposed to be the teachers. But
Yeah, that's
I agree
true.
with what you're saying,
Yeah.
that our children can teach us a lot. And certainly all of my children have taught me a lot, not just Emily, but all of my
Yeah.
kids. And I
Yeah.
really appreciate everything that you're doing to help others. I think it's a very noble thing that you're doing. And I know it helps you. I get it. But I do think not everybody could do that. And thank you for what you're doing. And I look forward to that book when it comes out, to hearing you speak more. And
Yeah.
we're going to share, like I said, your TEDx talk with our listeners.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Angela, for all the work that you do, to bringing to light the problems with addiction and fentanyl and everything that's going on over there. I really send my love and strength to all of you and all your listeners.
Yes, I know Europe has not been hit as hard. I've talked to people in Europe, and I
No.
hope it continues to stay that way, but I'm afraid it may not.
Yeah.
But we do have a big problem in the United States that, well, every day chipping away at. So the latest numbers that I just heard from the White House are that overdose deaths are down in the last 12 months by nearly 8%.
Mhm.
So I'll take that as a light,
Mhm.
you know.
Yeah. Well, you're doing amazing
Well,
work,
thank
so
you.
thank
And
you.
you make me wish I could have known Lucas. And again, I'm horribly sorry for what you've been through, and I'm so grateful for the work that you do.
Oh, thank you. And, of course, I'd want Lucas to be here. But, because of everything that's happened, I'm now doing all these things, amazing things. And I have found purpose through my pain.
Yes. Well, thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela.
And thank you for listening to this episode of Grieving Out Loud. You can find a link to Nicola's TED Talk in the show notes of this episode. While you're there, we'd appreciate it if you took a moment to rate and review this podcast, along with sharing it with your friends and family. Thank you so much. Until next time, wishing you faith, hope, and courage. This podcast is produced by Casey Wannenberg King and Kaylee Fitz. Are you ready to protect the next generation from the dangers of substance use? Emily's Hope has created a comprehensive K-12 substance use prevention curriculum designed to educate, empower, and equip students with the tools they need to make healthy choices. Our age-appropriate lessons start in kindergarten and build through high school, using science, real stories, and interactive learning to help kids understand their bodies, brains, and risk of drug use. We're already reaching thousands of students across multiple states, and we're just getting started. Visit emilyshopeedu.org to learn more and share our curriculum with your school administrators and counselors. At Emily's Hope, we believe prevention begins with education. Let's work together to keep our kids safe.